Ever imagine a world where AI is actually used to protect human rights? Sounds kind of utopian, right?
Yeah, it
Well,
does.
that's what the U.S. State Department is going for with this new thing, their risk management profile for AI and human rights.
Interesting.
It's like a guidebook they put together for anyone who's building, using, or even just thinking about AI.
Okay.
And get this, it's not about hard and fast rules. It's more about everyone getting on the same page,
Mhm.
creating a roadmap towards AI that actually helps humanity, you know?
It's really fascinating because it's not just governments that are worried about the potential downsides of AI. Businesses have a big part to play too.
Oh, so it's like everyone's invited to figure this out.
Exactly. The guide wants to bridge this gap we see between tech people and human rights advocates because the stakes are high for everyone, right?
Right.
And it all comes back to some pretty basic principles like the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Remember those? Those basic rights that everyone's supposed to have.
Yeah, things like freedom of speech and freedom from discrimination. Though, to be honest, I haven't really thought about those in relation to AI before.
Well, that's exactly what the State Department is saying. They're even more relevant now than ever because of how fast AI is evolving. This isn't some abstract future problem. It's about real risks happening right now.
Okay, so enough of the vague warnings. Give me an example. What kind of risks are we talking about?
Okay, imagine you're applying for a loan.
Okay.
You're more than qualified, but you get rejected. Not because of anything you did, but because the bank's AI system rejected you. Maybe it has some bias in its algorithm, maybe from the data it was trained on.
Mhm.
That's your right to equal opportunity potentially gone in an algorithm flash.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot more concrete and a lot more unsettling than I was picturing.
Right.
What else are they concerned about?
Well, think about surveillance, that feeling of being watched online. AI can take that to a whole new level, analyzing tons of your data, impacting things like our freedom to even express ourselves online without being afraid.
Okay, now I'm officially creeped out. But I'm assuming the State Department isn't just waving their hands in the air shouting, the robots are coming. They're actually offering solutions, right?
Absolutely. And that's where it gets really interesting. They point to a document called the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, or AI RMF for short.
NIST, AI RMF. Those sound pretty official.
They are, but don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're all about setting standards. And the AI RMF is essentially a checklist for building and using AI ethically and responsibly.
So if the State Department's guide is the why, the AI RMF is the how.
You got it. The State Department even gives specific examples for each step of the AI RMF, showing developers how to build safeguards into their AI from the very beginning. For example, the AI RMF talks about having diverse teams during development. And we're not just talking about engineers, we're talking about including community members, ethicists, people from different backgrounds.
Yeah. So it's not just about the code itself. It's about the people writing the code and what they think, the perspective they bring to the table.
Precisely. And that's just one example. The guide really digs deep into how these principles can be put into practice.
That's great and all, but we've all seen companies and governments talk about ethics and then still prioritize profits or power. How do we know this guide is going to lead to real change?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Honestly, there are no easy answers.
Hmm.
This guide, the AI RMF, they're tools, really. And how effective they are, it all comes down to how they're used and, importantly, enforced.
So how do we make sure these, well-intentioned guidelines actually turn into something real, into meaningful action? What's the missing piece?
One crucial element is public pressure.
Hmm.
The more people who are aware of these issues and demand accountability from the people in charge, the harder it will be to ignore them. You know what I mean? It's about holding their feet to the fire.
So it's not just on governments and these big tech companies to figure this out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like voting one vote might not seem like much, but when you have millions of votes, it can change the course of history, right? The same thing applies here. If enough people say, hey, we want ethical AI, companies and governments, they'll have no choice but to listen.
Okay, I'm starting to understand the bigger picture, but what can I, as just one person, actually do to make sure AI is used ethically? It seems like a big problem.
Never underestimate the power of just being aware. You're already doing it by listening to this deep dive. The more you understand about AI and how it can impact things, the better you'll be able to, spot problems and push for change.
Okay, that's fair. Knowledge is power, or whatever they say. But what about, concrete actions? What can I do with this knowledge?
You can do a lot, actually. Be mindful of the data you share online. Every click, every purchase, it all feeds these algorithms, right?
Mm.
And by being more conscious of your digital footprint, you're making it harder for these companies to build AI systems that try to take advantage of you, that use your data against you or manipulate you.
It's so easy to forget that all our online activity is like being tracked and analyzed. It's kind of creepy when you really think about it.
Right.
But it sounds like it's not just about protecting ourselves.
No.
We need to be thinking about others too, right? Especially those who might not have the same voice or platform.
Exactly. Support organizations that are out there fighting for ethical AI, whether it's donating, volunteering, or even just sharing their message on social media. Every little bit helps.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But let's get back to the guide itself for a moment. We've talked a lot about the risks, but what about the good that AI can do for human rights?
That's an important point. AI isn't inherently good or bad. It's a tool, really. Like
Hmm.
any tool, it can be used for good or for, not so good things. The guide actually talks about some pretty amazing ways AI can be used to protect and promote human rights.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, well, imagine AI being used to identify and break up human trafficking rooms,
Wow.
or to help refugees who are trying to navigate these complex legal systems. Or picture this. AI monitoring environmental conditions in real time so we can protect vulnerable communities from climate change.
Hmm.
And those are just a few examples of how AI can be a force for good.
Those are some really powerful examples. It's like encouraging to know that AI has the potential to make a real difference.
Yeah.
But I also can't help but think about the potential for things to go wrong, even if we have the best intentions. How do we make sure that AI that's meant for good doesn't accidentally end up causing harm?
That's where those principles we talked about, the ones in the guide, come in. They stress the need for always being vigilant, for constantly monitoring and evaluating these AI systems to make sure they're actually achieving their goals without any nasty side effects.
This is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. We have to keep reassessing and readjusting as AI gets more advanced, as we learn more about how it's affecting the world.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and course correcting when we need to. And it's a process that needs everyone, policymakers, technologists, ethicists, and everyday people to work together. We all have a stake in this, right? And we all have a role to play in making sure AI is a force for good in the world.
This guide from the State Department is focused on the U.S., right? But AI is everywhere. It's a global thing. What about the rest of the world?
You're totally right. AI doesn't care about borders. That's why it's so important for countries to work together on these issues. The U.S. taking this step is great, but it's just the beginning, right? We need other countries to step up and create their own ethical guidelines for AI.
It's like we're at a crossroads, and we have to decide together what kind of future we want with AI.
Exactly. Do we want a future where AI is in the hands of authoritarian regimes, where it's used to erode human rights? Or do we want a future where it uplifts everyone? A future where AI solves global problems and creates a more just world for everyone?
I think the answer to that is pretty clear. So where do we go from here? What are some concrete steps in the guide that can make sure we get this right? So we've talked about the big picture and all the global stuff, but let's get back to the risk management profile itself. What are some of the actual steps the State Department is recommending to make sure we're using AI the right way?
They actually do a good job breaking it down. They connect what they're saying to every stage of the AI lifecycle. It's like a roadmap for ethical AI development from the very beginning to the very end.
Okay, I like that, a roadmap. Walk me through it. Where does it all start?
Right at the beginning, even before any code is written. The guide really stresses having clear policies in place, and not just in governments, but inside private companies too. Policies that make human rights a priority throughout the entire process of developing AI.
So baking those ethics in from the start.
Mhm.
But policies are one thing, actually making them work is another. What does the guide say about making sure these principles actually turn into real-world action?
They talk about something called algorithmic impact assessments. Basically, before you release an AI system, before it's out there, developers would need to really assess how it might impact human rights.
So like an environmental impact report, but for algorithms?
Yeah, exactly. They'd have to consider questions like, could this be discriminatory? Could it be used for surveillance in a way that violates privacy? Could it be used to silence people or manipulate public opinion?
Those are some pretty big questions. I imagine those assessments could get really complicated.
They can, but that's the point. We're not trying to fix a problem after it's too late, right? It's about addressing these challenges early on.
It sounds like they're really trying to get ahead of things,
Yeah.
trying to see potential problems before they actually hurt someone.
Right. And it's not just about preventing harm. They also want developers to think about how their AI can actually be used to make human rights better. Could it be used to, like, fight poverty? Could it improve access to healthcare? Could it even help people from different cultures understand each other better?
There's a theme here, isn't there? It's about being intentional with AI, about actively shaping it in a way that benefits us, rather than just letting it do its own thing. But let's be real, who's actually going to make sure this happens? Is there, like, an AI police force out there watching for bad algorithms?
That would be something, wouldn't it? But seriously, the guide emphasizes that this is everyone's responsibility. Governments need to create regulations and enforce them. Companies need to have ethical practices, and they need to be held accountable. And us, we need to stay informed, stay engaged, and make our voices heard.
So we're back to that idea of collective action, right? Us, businesses, and governments all working together to steer AI in the right direction.
Exactly. And that starts with conversations like this one, right? The more we talk about these issues, the more awareness we raise, and the better prepared we'll all be, not just for the challenges AI brings up, but for all the opportunities, too.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive for today. We've covered a lot, from how AI could be risky to the amazing ways it could actually help us. We talked about ethical frameworks, why transparency and accountability are so important, and how we all have a part to play in shaping what AI becomes.
Yeah, and if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all this, that's okay. This is complicated stuff. Just stay curious, stay involved, and keep asking those tough questions.
Because, like you said, the future of AI isn't set in stone. It's being written right now, and we all have a say in how that story unfolds.
That's right. Until next time, keep diving.